Hi, this is Quentin Langley for Brandjack News. Huge story in brandjacking and media ethics, biggest week ever, I think. First of all, brandjacking, or at least one form of brandjacking, seems now to be illegal in France. A company has been fined by a French court for maliciously editing a Wikipedia entry and removing references to one of its competitors. €25,000 fine, that's 36,000 US dollars, a fine imposed on a company for brandjacking. First time, I'm pretty sure, anywhere in the world. Media ethics, massive story in the UK. The News of the World, the most popular newspaper in Europe, or at least the one with the largest number of sales, is to close down. A very profitable newspaper, but nonetheless, this weekend's edition, this Sunday's edition, will be the last. This is a story, a media ethics story, that has been running in the UK for some years and has only really turned around in terms of public interest within the past week. The paper seems to have engaged in illegal phone hacking, tapping into people's phones, especially mobile phones. And as long as the victims were mostly politicians and minor celebrities, no one much cared. It was a point of obsession with media commentators and politicians, but the general public kept buying the paper anyway. Uh, and in some ways, I have a lot of sympathy with that position. Let's face it, it's difficult to sympathize with some of these victims. If you think about a millionaire footballer who has been branding himself as the wholesome family man, but all the while cheating on his wife. If that comes out, I don't have much sympathy for that person. Or take Simon Hughes, Liberal Democrat MP, who was the beneficiary, if not necessarily the author, of the single most viciously homophobic political campaign that has ever been run in Britain. And yet it turns out has been phoning gay chat lines. Difficult to sympathise with that person and his right to privacy. Uh, After all, these people chose the public life, and if they get reported for bad things as well as good, well, that's what comes with the life that they chose. I think the general public has a little bit more sympathy with the royal family. They didn't choose the public life. In the main, they were born that way. But nonetheless, extremely rich people with an awful lot of privileges, not easy to cast them as the victims. So the general public wasn't paying much attention to this story until the past week. If a newspaper hacks into the phone of families of soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan or Iraq, that's different. But worst of all, hacking into the phone of Millie Dowler, 13-year-old girl who at the time was missing. We now know that she was already dead. She was a kidnap and murder victim. But that was not known at the time that the paper was hacking her phone. They were not only listening to messages that formed part of an active police investigation, they deleted some of the messages, not only giving the family false hope that Millie herself was still checking her messages, but actually potentially deleting evidence that might at some point have been useful in a trial, or might, as far as anyone knew at that time, still have been used to rescue a girl who was being held hostage. Um, this crosses a line as far as the public is concerned. Advertisers have been fleeing the paper, not wishing to be associated with that paper anymore. And that is the end of the news. It's not the end of me talking about brandjacking for this week, though. Greenpeace is still out there. They are targeting now Volkswagen. Volkswagen has been running advertisements with a Star Wars theme, and Greenpeace has turned that round, positioning Volkswagen as being the dark side of the Force. This is a major issue not only for Volkswagen, but for George Lucas. We have to assume that he sold the rights to use Star Wars imagery to Volkswagen for a very large sum of money. If that use of Star Wars imagery is going to be turned around on the people who purchased that and made to present them in a very negative way, then it becomes much harder for people like George Lucas to sell their intellectual property. So George Lucas very upset, Volkswagen very upset, Greenpeace, as usual, putting a very powerful point. So, big week in brandjacking. One form of brandjacking now illegal in France. Um, the biggest media ethics story in the 168-year history of the news of the world. And Greenpeace once again setting the standard for brandjacking. That is the week in brandjacking. This is Quentin Langley for Brandjack News.